Halo Season 2 just started, and everyone was pretty hyped because of a couple little teasers, and the trailers looked like they were promising. Maybe they're going to turn things around. And the answer, unsurprisingly to most of us, was absolutely not. The trailer was a bait and switch, just like the previous ones were. The show is right back to the same crap. It's better on the surface, and that's about it. For my videos, I covered Halo Season 1, if you want to check them out on my channel. I go into reasons why the show is bad on its own, and also why they don't understand the lore and how they butcher it. So this will combine both lore and the show itself. Unfortunately, what they do to the lore is an atrocity, and their basic writing for the show is an abomination. So let's get into it. We start off and get the scene with Pablo Schreiber, or Master Chief, or Master Cheeks, or Johnny Rings, and they're undoing his zombie thing from the end of Season 1 with Cortana. He's supposed to be brought back to life, Cortana's pulled out, so he's just John again, even though he was clinically dead to end the season, is what they said. Anyway, we start off on Sanctuary. This is a reference to a Halo 2 map. Again, they pull from the most surface level shit to make you think there's Easter eggs and that they actually care. They don't. What's going on here is on the planet Sanctuary, they're here evacuating citizens to other planets, presumably because of the war with the Covenant. They don't say it directly, but that's the implication. Right away, we get a really forced scene where John goes off on his own while Viz and Kai sit back. And then Riz goes with him to this little town because they can't get these people to evacuate because they're religious. And pretty much right away, I think the culture war stuff is bleeding into the show yet again. The military guy is being a huge dick. He's telling them he's going to evac them by force, and he's being portrayed as kind of an asshole here. And the other characters reference him as such. Kai and Vanek are talking, and they're referring to getting rid of their pills that were in their spine that controlled them. I was optimistic for just a second because I was like, oh, maybe they're just going to get rid of that whole plot line and not address it again. But no, it's still part of the story. They use it to make the Silver Team, which is the store brand version of Blue Team, emotionally unstable and untrusted. So it's actually a pretty big plot point. The reason that this doesn't work and really undermines the entire lore is because in the books, in the games, the Spartans are just brainwashed. They were taken as kids, and this was just beaten into them from age 5 or 6 for their entire lives. Having them remove these pills and then become emotionally unstable is way out of character for all the Spartans because they act all over the place emotionally. They almost seem immature, and they're these battle-hardened veterans who've been fighting perpetually for decades at this point. It undermines the lore because way later in the books, you do start to see the Spartans think for themselves a bit, question things, question Halsey. Some of them still like Halsey, some of them are in between. So you have this whole range of personalities. And now in the show, they've cut these tablets out and they're all pretty much the same. They're just unstable and kind of all over the place. And it doesn't really make any sense to have veterans who've been fighting this long be emotionally unstable during warfare. And again, this is a huge plot point that comes up right in the first 2 episodes where they actually don't trust Master Chief because he's emotionally unstable. We get this shaman woman lecturing Master Chief about how they have faith and does he have faith and does he know who he is. She might as well look right into the camera and say this is the theme of the season because Master Chief doesn't respond, he just stares at her. And right away, we get a lot of stupidity right in this one scene. So the fact that the Spartans are here, they're bitching the entire time that they're on babysitting duty and why they're evacuating planets. And it's actually a good point. Why would you use your resources like this to evacuate random small planets of people and weirdo villagers who are in a cult who don't even want to be evacuated when your Spartans should be out fighting the Covenant and doing missions behind enemy lines, whatever. So the whole fact that they're even here is ridiculous. And then we get all this stuff where the world building is just destroyed. Right here, this is from the little teaser they kept putting out on YouTube. Master Chief is scaling this wall. Kai is looking through the sniper and says, I'm going to lose him in the fog. And they're having issues with their comms and stuff. And it's like, how can they have issues with their comms when they're like a kilometer apart? How can she not have some kind of thermal on her vision or anything to see through the fog? This comes up in a minute too, where there's a bunch of invisible elites. So none of this makes any sense. Why is John by himself? They sent Riz to help people evacuate, and then John goes up into a dangerous area by himself. And Vanek and Kai are just chilling in a place where they can't even provide cover. So all of this is super contrived just to get the little Master Chief versus Sang Healy fight scene that they put in the trailer over and over, that they want to pretend like this is what the show is going to be, when anyone with any common sense who's been paying attention knows it's fucking not. Master Chief scales these cliffs. He says, hey, I'm going to go a little bit further because there's a couple empty warthogs. And at this point, he loses comms. Again, none of this makes any sense. He walks like 100 feet and suddenly loses comms. And this group of 3 Marines is stuck there because they're the communications group. They say everyone else was killed or taken, and they couldn't get comms. Meanwhile, they showed the Master Chief walking like 100 feet, and he had comms, even if they were a little bit staticky, which I'm not even sure why they'd be staticky. I guess 500 years in the future, radio technology doesn't get any fucking better. So this entire scene is just really contrived. Again, they don't give a fuck about the Halo music. I have no idea why. When he scales the wall, they play a little bit of it, of like the dun 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 dun, dun 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 dun, and it's really low, and it's like, what are you doing? Master Chief's rock climbing, and we're playing the Halo music. And then when we get up here, we get like the tense, high-pitched whining noise as these Marines get picked off by invisible Sangheili. So a terrible use of music. They're trying to do like a horror thing here. And again, the world building is just destroyed. Because in Halo, they have radar that's motion sensitive. Why would they not have some kind of radar that they can see in the fucking fog 500 years in the future? They show his inside the helmet thing in the first season. They actually show his radar. So this entire scene makes no sense. They have no radar. They have no comms. They're really isolated. All inexplicable just to get this little fight scene. The fight scene itself is decent, but for me, the camera was so shaky and moving the entire time. It was actually kind of nauseating to watch. But the choreography and stuff itself wasn't bad. The special effects are okay. I'm assuming that part of the shaky cam stuff was to hide some of the CG because of all the elites. Eventually, Master Chief kills all these elites and rescues this chick, Perez, who's the last survivor. After this little fight, Chief is going to rescue Perez, and all of these elites that were just staying there that he was completely unaware of because he has no radar, uncloak themselves and show their swords, including the Arbiter, which is what this guy in the front is with his armor. It looks cool, I guess. Doesn't make a bit of fucking sense for the plot, and I've already seen all the retards on the Halo subreddit being like, oh, it looks so fucking cool. This is so much better than last season. No. Last season was shallow bullshit. This season follows right in the footsteps. And again, in another highly logical move, they have a chance to kill a Spartan, and they just turn invisible and leave, and then the planet gets glassed. Why? Well, they popped in to look cool, let a few of their buddies die, and then fucked off. Who knows? They have to evac the planet. We see the whole thing getting glassed. The visuals look cool for it. That's about all I can say. Any compliments I give this show will be surface level, and unfortunately, the visuals look cool is about the extent of it. And I feel bad for every person who worked on this, that the writers failed them the way that they did. Because this show, you can see the work put in a lot of places, except for the writing and the world building and the characters, which are the most important things. Here's a shot. You can see where the stuff in the distance has already been plasmaed, and everybody is evacuating except for the shaman and her lunatic friends who don't want to leave the planet because they'd rather just die there. So I at least wanted to point this out so you could see there is some cool shots in here. They evac. We get the theme song, which is not the Halo music, surprisingly. John's in the shower. Because if we don't see Master Chief naked, I don't want to fucking watch Halo. And he's hearing Cortana's voice, and he's obviously got PTSD. And this show really devolves into all of the Spartans' feelings and PTSD and weird kind of drama. Absolute dog shit. Not what Halo should be. If it was done well, it still wouldn't feel like Halo. It would just be a generic sci-fi show. The Spartans are getting debriefed, and John is essentially throwing a tantrum. And also, Captain Keyes is now Admiral Keyes, because fuck the lore. I mean, aside from the fact that they already race swapped him. And we get introduced to Colonel Ackerson. And I hate this so much. They refer to him as Mr. Ackerson. He's wearing a suit like the entire time instead of some kind of military uniform. And this is going to be a mixture of criticisms for the show and the lore. What I just said was criticisms of the show, because they address him, who's a high-ranking ONI officer, as Mr. instead of whatever his title is, Colonel. And also the fact that he's not in some kind of dress uniform or whatever that he would be wearing, really, like Keyes is in the background. We also have the fact that Keyes is an admiral, and he's just deferring to this guy from another branch of the military as if he's toothless. And this is all stuff that's a really big deal in the books, where there's a constant struggle between ONI and the Navy, and they're trying to figure out who controls what, and there's a lot of politicking and back and forth. And they just nuke all that and say this guy's in charge. Keyes literally refers to him as the boss. And John is pissed off because he's like, hey, the Covenant was there before they glassed the planet. Something else is going on. And his theory, and I don't know why this is the theory because it's absolutely fucking retarded, is that the Covenant is training to practice invasions. And this is another one of those things that makes no sense in the show and the lore. In the lore, when the Covenant doesn't completely glass a planet, it's because they're looking for something. Obviously, it's Forerunner artifacts because they view them as holy, and they're way advanced technology from the Forerunners. On top of this, if you know anything about the history of the Covenant, from the terminals in the game or the books or whatever, the way that the Covenant expanded was by force over millennia. And the idea that an intergalactic spacefaring civilization that's been around for millennia wouldn't know how to invade a fucking planet is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life for a plot point. And it seems like that's where it's headed because he says it multiple times and there's no pushback on it. And as far as Ackerson goes in the books, the big thing between him and Halsey is that they're fighting for funding. So Ackerson wants funding for the projects that he wants to control. Halsey wants funding for the Spartan projects. And it's interesting because in the books, none of this will be in the show, I'm assuming. But in the games, if you've played them, obviously the Spartans that we play as Master Chief are the Spartan 2s. The Spartan 1s were Johnson. There's a different program and all that, different technology. The Spartan 4s, you see Locke in the later generation where they're not Spartans until they're adults, and they get put into the program if they're elite, and then eventually they spread it to the whole military. The Spartan 3s are what ends up being Ackerson's project. Ackerson creates these Spartan 3s as volunteers, quote unquote, but they're 5 or 6 years old, and they give them all these drugs so they don't die as easily. He actually kidnaps a different Spartan, Kurt, to take part in this, to lead these new kids, and they create different companies and units to take on crazy suicide missions, pretty much to buy time for the humans to try to come up with a winning strategy. So they take out big infrastructure, big material resources, whatever from the Covenant to delay them. So Ackerson's role is really interesting in the book, even though he's clearly a dick. And his personality, he's very egotistic, but he's very military also. In one of the comics, he does die a brave death, lying to the Covenant while he's under torture. And he did have an important role in the Spartan universe because the Spartan 3s are a huge plot point in the books, in the expanded lore. But he went into the military very young. He's been in the military for at least 30 years. So he's about 50 in the books. Obviously, the actor they cast is about 40, and he looks maybe mid-30s if you wanted to really high-end him. And I feel bad for the actor because he actually does a good job, but his character just kind of sucks in the show. So that's the background for all the stuff they're butchering and why the show is completely stupid for this entire plot point. Because you can already see after these first 2 episodes that Ackerson is going to do the thing where he's being reasonable based on what he knows, but he's going to be wrong in the end, and you're supposed to view him as a dick. Even if he's a dick, but he's being reasonable, you're supposed to view him as pure evil. For me, that's at least where it seems like it's going. After less than 20 minutes of the Master Chief, we start going on side quests again, and these are a huge waste of time. We're at the rubble. This shit is so cringy, and I actually can't believe it's in the show. This weird chick in the top hat is auctioning off refugees to be indentured servants in the rubble, and they have a criminal and this little dorky kid who's talking about how his planet got glassed, but no one wants him for a servant because he doesn't have skills. And Soren is sitting here laughing, and the kid says that he knows where Halsey is to try to get Soren to take him in. Soren is supposed to be a protagonist. They kind of seem like they were going for a Jack Sparrow reluctant hero thing with him last season, where he helps out Quan even though she sucks. And here he's just sitting there laughing at the indentured servants. In universe, this is miserable that he's supposed to be like this weird pirate king in the rubble, and they're doing all this cringe shit. And this lady in the top hat starts riding on the back of the other guy like a horse because he's a criminal. And he actually does get taken in to be an indentured servant, but this kid doesn't. There's really not much here. You just kind of see that Soren's been an asshole for 6 months because that's the time jump we're operating under. John goes to meet Ackerson. He realizes that Ackerson was out in the field and in combat and stuff, and he thinks it's a good thing. And Ackerson is questioning John about his mental stability after everything with Cortana. And they give some exposition about how Halsey performed this illegal experiment, and they subjected John to it, who's their most valuable resource. And he's questioning what happened on Sanctuary because for some reason, the Spartans don't have video feed. The Marines don't have video feed. And the planet was glass, so there's no evidence of anything else. Again, very tenuous plot points they use to kind of thread this story together. And this whole dynamic between John and Ackerson I absolutely hate, both for the show and lore reasons. For the show, as far as the military goes, John's rank is Master Chief Petty Officer, so he's super low. Ackerson is a colonel, and we know he's very high up at Oni, enough to boss around an admiral. And John talks to him pretty defiantly, pretty disrespectfully. He doesn't say sir a whole lot. He gets pissed off at him at one point and says, I think we're done here, and goes to get up. And Ackerson says, sit down, please. This is all nonsense for the show. The military is very structured, very hierarchical. If you've ever met a military guy, even in their private life, a lot of them are really adherent to these kind of disciplines. Like a lot of military kids will say yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am, that type of thing. So to think that a petty officer would talk this way to a colonel, and certainly one who is actually in the field and not just some office guy, is ridiculous. And as far as the lore goes, Ackerson is pretty subtle, but he's always taking digs at the Spartans because he views them as Halsey's robots and very brainwashed, but he's still very military. And it's way more interesting in the book because John is getting debriefed after a mission, and Hood is the one asking questions, and John explains what's happening. He just gives very direct, straightforward answers, very detached. And Ackerson takes a couple of jabs at him, being a dick, and Hood lays into him about how the Spartans have earned his respect and saved his life personally multiple times. So there's all this power struggle going on. There's a lot of dynamics at play. And this dynamic of Ackerson being this guy in a suit and John being a disrespectful petty officer is absurd. And his personality in the book is much more reserved. Even when he gets pissed off, one of the characters in the book, The Flood, says something along the lines of his face is completely still, but I can see his jaw clenching and his cheeks like flexing a little bit. But otherwise, he's completely composed. And that's how he always is in the books, is super disciplined, very composed. Even if he's pissed off, he internalizes it. So lore-wise, this is way out of character. And then even for the show, it's just nonsense as far as a military organization would operate. And this is also what I was talking about, where the show is framing Ackerson as being a dick, even though he is being a dick, but he's also at least partially right. And the show is trying to frame it as he's completely evil, John's completely in the right, and you should just side with him. We hop back to the rubble, which no one really cares about, even for this show, so it's a really low bar. And Soren's wife is laying into him. And this is where I was saying the culture war stuff I think is seeping in. Pretty much all the men in the show are assholes this season so far, and the women are the ones taking care of business, and they're strong, and they're the right ones. She tears him a new asshole about not sharing his money from Quan with the rest of his men, even though he went alone. And she's talking about how they're turning away from him, and they're turning down refugees and indentured servants, and everything is his fault, and he's playing Pirate King. And every time he hears Halsey's name, he wants to go run to her and see if he can find her. And he just kind of takes it. And then him and his son have a conversation. He's kind of a dick. So he's got the bad husband thing, bad leader thing, bad dad thing, where his son wants reassurance and he gives it to him, but not as much as he wants. And the wife wants to run away, and he's like, where are we going to run? Which is a good point. And also, the actor's not bad. They just don't really give him much to do. And this whole separate plot line is just dull. This is another thing that, lore-wise, they destroyed, is the rubble. The rubble is initially in the Cole Protocol, which is kind of Captain Key's story before he's Captain Key's. And there's this big thing where they run into the Covenant out there who's trading weapons with humans. You get to see Grey Team, who's kind of like the weirdo, isolated Spartan team who goes behind enemy lines for months or years at a time. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on there that's really good. And the show, they just turn the rubble into like this little pirate colony. And they don't really do much with it other than waste time. And this isn't a deal breaker, but it's something that is a peeve. And it's these little details that get missed throughout the series that I think really show the lack of care for what Halo is. And Soren is the same height as his wife. Even if she's like 5'10" and in heels, that makes him like 6'2". John is only a couple inches taller than Ackerson, and the actor is 5'11". The smallest Spartan 2 in the books is Kelly. And I think she's like 6'10" with armor and like 6'4" without it. Master Chief is like 6'10", and he's average for a Spartan. And that's the type of thing that I know budget-wise might be a pain in the ass, but you can use camera tricks. If you ever watch the behind-the-scenes Lord of the Rings stuff, they use all kinds of camera tricks to make the heights the way they need them to be. But John Rhys Davies in real life, who plays Gimli, is like 6 foot. Obviously, he's not a dwarf. It's just one of those things that every time I see them the same height as regular humans, it really annoys me. But anyway, I don't want to drag that on. That's not a huge deal. It's just an annoying thing that I think shows a lack of care. We go back to the Spartans. They're working out. I'm not going to go too much into this. Pablo Schreiber and the dude that plays Vanek are good at working out, at least. They're pretty ripped. The chicks are in good shape, but obviously they're not as muscular as the dudes, which, whatever, I don't care that much. They're watching some kind of UNSC update, and Perez, the girl that Chief saved on Sanctuary, is getting credit for helping fight off the Covenant and evacuate the colonists. And she gets the Colonial Cross Award, and Chief doesn't get acknowledged, but someone in the crowd says, "Where's Master Chief?" And Ackerson says, "Silver Team couldn't be here today because they're out there fighting on the front lines for you." This is something almost directly from the books, that Oni is constantly putting out that the Spartans are winning battles, that they never die, all this propaganda to give morale to the rest of the military. It's interesting to me that the show frames this as bad. Like the way that everyone behaves about it and the way it's shot makes it look like they're wrong for doing that. But if you're in an existential war for the survival of your species, propaganda like this would probably be pretty important. And really the right thing to do to keep people fighting. You can't just go on TV and say, well, another day, another planet glassed. Keep fighting, guys, all the way to the end. So I don't think it's a big deal. I think it's interesting that the show frames it as negative, though. This entire interaction and scene I absolutely fucking hate. One of the other Spartan groups comes in and says, why do you guys get treated like war heroes for doing the same shit we're doing? Which is just another day on the job type thing. And they immediately start talking shit to each other about putting each other in body bags. Riz calls this blonde girl a bitch and says she'll put her in a body bag. And these other Spartans are talking shit about them taking out their pellets because they're emotionally unstable now. The other Spartans are frowning upon them for taking out their pellets. Again, this makes no sense for the show or the lore. For the show, it makes no sense because they're all Spartans. Presumably, they've all been trained together for 30 years. They would be closer to each other than anyone. There's only a couple dozen of them in all of existence. And instead, they're fighting and bickering and talking shit. It's weird. If this was like an Army, Navy, Air Force thing, then sure. But they were a unit who worked together since childhood. This kind of thing is just stupid. And again, as far as the lore goes, it's the same thing. Even the Spartans who are more loners, which is Gray Team, which is Jai, Adriana, and Michael, I think. Been a while. But Gray Team, either way. They're like the reclusive ones who are okay on their own and kind of loners. Linda's the same way as the sniper. They're still incredibly close to the other Spartans because they all went through this program that no one in human existence has gone through except for those 75 kids. So this whole thing I just absolutely fucking hate. The fact that they keep bringing up these pellets instead of just leaving it alone and never mentioning them again, I think is a terrible decision. But like I said, they want to focus on the PTSD and the emotions and the drama kind of the Spartans, and it just doesn't work. And as far as this whole interaction with Silver and Cobalt goes, there's some horrendous trash talk in here. One guy calls Riz ugly and she says suck big ass. And then Vanek says I'm about to wear you like a sock, which kind of sounds like he's gonna butt fuck him. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. I've never heard that before. Maybe I'm just a boomer. But Cobalt explains that some comms thing went down. They had to go look at it. It's not even combat work. And this is what John was bitching about to Ackerson, is that the comms went down in Sanctuary. Then the Covenant came in and did their thing. I have no idea how this works, that the comms can just go down for the entire planet secretly, or that no one would notice. But that's kind of the plot point. Cobalt's going to check out a comms unit being down. And the scene ends with Ackerson saying that we have heroes, and they show the Master Chief. In the books, this takes place more and more as the story goes on, because the Spartans are kind of mythological at the beginning, where people don't even think they're real, or they're kind of boogeymen, which is how they mentioned them last season when they were helping out Quan's colony. So kind of a 180 there, where they were like boogeymen and ghosts, and now suddenly they're heroes. John's pissed off because they sent Cobalt to this comms relay and didn't tell them that the Covenant are going to be there, because John is insisting they will. And he interrupts Ackerson's meeting and says that you need to tell them what's out there, and it seems like no one gives a shit. Again, throwing a tantrum. Completely inappropriate from military personnel to an officer or a high-ranking official. And again, retarded as far as the lore goes. And this is another funny part where Ackerson is clearly in the right, and John's throwing the tantrum, and we're supposed to think that Ackerson is the bad guy. Because John is like, please just listen to me. And Ackerson's like, I read your report. There were at least 30 of the Covenant. And John says, yes, sang Healy. And he goes, and they just disappeared. Did you kill them? Did you get rid of them? What happened? Which is a good point, because it makes no fucking sense. And Ackerson goes on to say that the Cortana system was wrong and shouldn't have been used that way, and that what Halsey did to you was wrong. And the way that the show sets up Cortana, it is wrong. It was a program to take over his dead corpse and operate the Mjolnir without him. They've just turned it into a nonsensical story because they broke away from the lore again. Ackerson goes to leave because he's like, look, until you're honest with me about your mental capacity, I can't send you guys into combat, which again is correct. And the whole time, John is trying to talk over him. Completely inappropriate, would never happen. And then as Ackerson goes to walk away, John grabs him, and Ackerson's like, get your hands off me. So all of this is super inappropriate at any workplace, and particularly in the military where you have a very, very rigid hierarchy. So really dumb for the show. Obviously out of character for the lore. I jumped ahead a bit earlier. this is where Soren talks to his son because he's going out on a pirate mission. His son doesn't want him to go. He wants reassurance. Soren's a little bit short with him and kind of a dick. There's not really much else to say about it. Soren is so far from the lore at this point that it doesn't even matter. The quick rundown of the lore with Soren is that he had a fucked up arm and couldn't wear the Mjolnir, so he got put on desk work and then ended up listening to some infiltrator from the insurrectionist and broke out from Oni and then went to live on his own because he didn't like living at a desk job and he couldn't be a Spartan. There might have been more to it, but that's the general thing for his story. And the show took that and went a whole other way with it. So we keep moving forward, and Soren did take this kid who didn't get put into servitude or anything because he wants to find Halsey, and this kid explains that he knows where Halsey is. John goes and secretly meets Parangoski. No clue how any of this is possible because the Spartans are viewed as a top secret military asset. So why he's had this much freedom the last couple seasons, I don't know. Parangoski got fired, again breaking way off from the lore. And for the show, I think it's also stupid. It makes her seem really incompetent, and then she gets blamed for Halsey, even though she's a high-ranking admiral. And the lore, just quickly for her, is that she's super high up in Oni, and she's always got secret projects going on. She's really got her hands in everything. She wants to win no matter the cost. She's fucking ruthless. She's smart. She's very good at navigating politically. She works with Hood quite a bit. The interaction between her and Halsey is interesting because Parangoski essentially says, look, I don't care if I'm a piece of shit. I'm not going to try to rationalize it like you do. I want to save humanity at all costs. So they have a pretty interesting back and forth because Halsey is very self-righteous and justifying what she did because it did save humanity, even though the initial intention for the Spartan program was to suppress the insurrection and keep the galaxy united. It worked out, and now she views herself as kind of the mother of all the saviors, which are the Spartans. But this short scene is John's meeting up with her. She says, give me any information you can, and I'll try to help you out. No clue how he wouldn't be tracked. No clue how she would be getting involved this way. Whatever. We cut back to Soren, who no one cares about still, and the little Irish redheaded kid is taking him to this broken up freighter where Halsey was supposed to be, and he says that he was working on it at the docks and he saw her. The kid springs his trap. They catch Soren. He's arrested for treason and blah, blah, blah. And his wife is going to take over their pirate gang now. And I just want to point out that Soren at this point has been captured by both Quan and this little ginger kid. And this is the guy that's supposed to be a hyper-competent Spartan pirate. But he lacks instincts to the point where he gets himself caught by Quan, who's a teenage girl, and this little dorky kid who's undercover, presumably for Oni or whoever. So yeah, just kind of shitting all over him here. We go back to John in what's another cringy scene, that he's repeatedly been visiting this hologram therapy session with this chick who he makes look like Cortana, and then he just talks to himself. And I can't tell if this is supposed to be like some kind of hologram escort sex service phone call type deal or what. But he's a returning customer, so his parameters are already in the thing. He just re-puts them in. And he wants her to stop talking, and she's freaking out about if it's her nose or what. And they make Cortana look weird in this season because they do show her later on. But yeah, this whole thing is just really cringy. I don't really understand how he's being let loose like this, why his mental capacity is so low. And this is a problem with the stupid pellets again. What the pellets did, seemingly, is suppress their emotions so much that they never learn to deal with anything. So they're adults not acting quite like children, but not acting like people who've been fighting in war for decades. So all this stuff is just super out of character. I think it's cringy. I don't understand why the Spartans have so much freedom or why they're so emotionally unstable. And if his Cortana PTSD wasn't enough, he's also got PTSD from Maki, the Covenant spy that he fucked. Everyone who bought into this whole thing that, oh, it's new writers and they're going to change shit and it's the fall of Reach, we picked up right where we left off. And next episode actually makes it worse. So yeah, John's a simp and a fucking loser. Good old Johnny Rings. And because this show wants maximum cringe and hate, we get some narration from Quan, who we find out next episode is an indentured servant. And I don't have any fucking idea what happened to her plot. Her whole thing was the revolution on Madrigal or whatever. And it ended with her finding the monitor in a well and witches in the desert and shit. And now suddenly she's an indentured servant by force with a collar tag in her ear. So I don't know what the hell is going on. There's a pretty neat shot here while she's narrating. This is the current Arbiter. That's his armor. I can't imagine it would be Thel Vadam from the games and books. And this is another one of those cool shots that I don't really know how much sense that it makes. Like, why would the Covenant ships be hanging out below the clouds and then slowly rise up? I had no fucking idea. But it looks good, I guess, whatever. It's supposed to get you hyped up for the next big battle, which, spoiler, is not fucking episode 2. My guess would be episode 4 or 5. And the first episode wraps up here in just a minute. We see Soren's kid has been meeting with Quan because Soren did make a comment like, why are you asking about adult stuff? And he says that he knows adult stuff and he's been learning from Quan. And the fucking balls on this show, man. To have her narrate this whole ending montage, and then it does the thing where it zooms in from behind her and she has her hood pulled up and then she pulls it down like she's fucking Luke Skywalker or something before Rian Johnson got to him. Unreal. Everyone fucking hates Quan. I would bet Quan hates Quan. The only good thing I can say for her is that they fixed her hair. So that's a slight plus. But the fact that they brought her back and I doubt they kill her off, ugh. And it looks like she's going to be vital to the plot because she ran into that monitor and now she's drawing shit on the ceiling, which I assume is going to be tied to the coordinates of Halo in the final episode of the season. I think it's called Halo, so I guess that's where we'll end up, or T's ending up at least, before the show gets canceled. Yeah, the whole thing with finding Halo in a fucking well on some backwater planet, give me a break, because of her ancestors and some witches. Yeah, let's introduce fucking magic into Halo. We end up with the zoom in on Soren's helmet, and that's it for episode 1. Obviously, I hated it. I hate what they've done to the lore. I hate that they take names and places and surface level shit just to pretend like they care about it. The show feels like they wanted to write something else and they threw Halo on top. It would be nice if we got some good stuff in here, but I am not optimistic. And Halo is something I've cared about for over 20 years at this point. So the fact that I've spent however many hundreds of dollars and thousands or tens of thousands of hours on this because I love it, and then people who don't give a shit about it get to come in and just take a dump all over it, infuriates me to no end. But that's where we are with modern franchises. I'm going to wrap up here. This went way too long. As always, comment, let me know what you think. I'll try to respond to everybody who's not just insulting me. And like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.